She lived in a small, quiet house at the end of a narrow street. The walls were plain and the furniture was old, but everything looked neat and clean. From the outside, anyone passing by would think it was a peaceful home, full of love and warmth. The father was a hard-working man, often leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. He was tired from his work, but he always tried to smile and speak kindly to his daughter, hoping she would feel safe and loved. The girl, though, carried a quiet sadness in her eyes that no one seemed to notice. Her stepmother was always smiling in front of her father. She greeted him warmly, prepared his favorite meals, and spoke to him with sweet words. To the father, she seemed like a perfect wife, caring and devoted. He often praised her without realizing that the warmth he saw was only a mask. The girl watched silently, too afraid to say anything, because she knew the truth was hidden behind those smiles. Whenever her father left for work, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. The stepmother's voice grew sharp, her words cold. Small mistakes were punished harshly. She made the girl scrub the floors until her hands hurt, clean the windows until they were spotless, and cook meals that she was barely allowed to eat. The girl's stomach often ached from hunger because she was given only scraps, and even then she had to wait until the stepmother had finished eating. The girl learned to keep her head down and move quietly. Every creak of the floor sounded loud, every shadow looked threatening. She walked around the house like a ghost, trying not to attract attention. The stepmother watched closely, ready to punish at the slightest mistake. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, the girl would cry softly in a corner, letting her tears fall without sound. Hoping no one would hear, neighbors often saw the girl outside, carrying water, sweeping the yard, or fetching things for her stepmother. They admired how well-behaved and hard-working she seemed. No one guessed the pain behind her quiet demeanor. The stepmother would smile at the neighbors, act kind, and even offer sweet words to anyone passing by. Everyone believed that the girl was living a lucky life. The stepmother who cared for her. The father, unaware of the cruelty his daughter faced, believed he had provided a good home. He worked hard every day to earn money for the family, thinking he was protecting them. He smiled at the girl when he returned home, hugged her, and sometimes asked about her day. The girl would nod and smile faintly, hiding the bruises and the fear, because she did not want to worry him or risk his anger against her. She had learned early that showing weakness or speaking the truth could make things worse. The days were long and lonely for the girl. Morning brought the stepmother's cold instructions. The night was spent exhausted, lying on a thin mattress in a corner of the room. She thought about her real mother often, wondering what her life would have been like if she were still alive. Sometimes she imagined being free, laughing, and playing without fear. But the reality of the house pulled her back every time. She knew she had to survive, to endure each day quietly, hoping that one day things might change. Even simple things like going to the market were controlled by the stepmother. The girl had to carry heavy bags, pay close attention to every detail, and always report back. A missing coin, a spilled item, or a small delay could lead to punishment. The stepmother made sure the girl understood that she was powerless, that no one would protect her, and that every mistake, no matter how small, would be met with harsh consequences. Sometimes the girl tried to speak to her father about small troubles, but the stepmother was always nearby, smiling, ready to twist words or make excuses. The father often believed her, thinking she was simply a devoted wife and caretaker. The girl realized that no one could help her unless she found a way to protect herself. She became careful with her words, careful with her actions, and careful with every look she gave. Despite the suffering, the girl held on to small moments of hope. When a neighbor offered a kind word or a small treat, it felt like sunlight breaking through a dark cloud. At school, she tried to focus on her lessons, dreaming that learning could give her a future where she could be free from cruelty. But returning home always reminded her that her reality was different, harsh and unyielding. She watched the seasons change through the small window of the house. Rain poured, snow fell, leaves turned gold and fell, but inside, life remained the same. The stepmother's cruelty continued quietly, hidden behind smiles and polite words when the father was around. The girl learned to survive in silence, holding her fear, her hunger, and her sadness inside. Sometimes at night, she would imagine her father noticing her pain, seeing the bruises, the tiredness, and the fear in her eyes. She wished he could see beyond the stepmother's mask. But she knew the harsh reality. He worked hard, believed in her stepmother's facade, and trusted the smiles he saw every day. So she endured, learning to hide her suffering, learning to smile faintly when she needed to, and learning that her safety depended on her silence. Days turned into months, months into years, and the pattern remained the same. The father went to work, the stepmother controlled the house, and the girl endured silently. She learned patience, resilience, and caution. Every day she whispered to herself that one day things would change, that somehow justice would find her, that she would be free from the shadow of cruelty. Until then, she survived, living quietly, hoping for a day when her voice could be heard, and her pain would finally matter. The house looked peaceful to anyone passing by. But inside, the girl's life was a constant struggle. She learned to navigate the dangers, to hide her pain, and to survive each day with a faint hope. The father's love, though real, was distant and unaware. The stepmother's smiles, though false, were convincing to everyone but the girl. And the girl, strong in her quiet way, carried on, dreaming of freedom, dreaming of kindness, and dreaming of a life where she could finally be safe and loved. When the father left for work, the house changed completely. The stepmother's voice, once soft and polite, became sharp and commanding. She would order the girl to do chores one after another without rest. The floors had to shine, the walls had to be scrubbed, and the windows cleaned until they sparkled. No corner was allowed to remain dusty, and even a tiny mistake was enough to cause anger. The girl moved quickly, her hands aching and her back sore, but she knew that slowing down could make things worse. Every action had to be perfect. The stepmother was strict about everything. The food the girl cooked had to be exactly right, the clothes folded neatly, and even the way she walked had to be precise. If the girl dropped a plate, spilled water, or forgot a single item, the stepmother's anger would flare. She would yell, "Punish," and make the girl feel as if she had done something terrible. Sometimes she would take away the girl's small comforts, like the little snacks she could sneak, or make her sit in a corner until she had nothing left to do but cry silently. The girl learned to hide her fear, to move quickly, and to never look her stepmother directly in the eye when she was angry. She tiptoed around the house, afraid that a sudden sound might trigger punishment. Even the floorboards creaking under her weight made her heart race. She carried heavy water jugs, washed dirty clothes, and cleaned rooms until her hands were raw. Hunger gnawed at her, but she had no time to eat properly. The stepmother always made sure she ate the last, giving her the smallest scraps and often nothing at all if she made a mistake. The stepmother's cruelty was not only physical, but also psychological. She would insult the girl, call her lazy or useless, and tell her she would never amount to anything. The girl tried to ignore the words, but they sank deep into her heart, making her feel small and unworthy. She often wondered why she was treated this way, why her father could not see the truth, and why no one came to help her. She had learned that speaking up only made things worse, so she stayed silent, hiding her pain behind a faint smile whenever anyone came to visit. Even when she was alone, the girl could not relax. She had learned that the stepmother could become angry at any moment, for any reason. She had to anticipate her moods, guess what might make her happy, and avoid anything that could provoke her. Every task had to be done with care, every mistake corrected immediately, and every sound carefully controlled. She had become a master at moving quietly, cleaning thoroughly, and keeping her fear hidden. Sometimes the stepmother would pretend to be kind, offering small gestures that felt like rewards. She would hand the girl a tiny treat or speak in a softer tone, only to pull it away the next moment with a cruel remark. The girl had learned that these gestures were traps, designed to make her dependent and obedient. She would take the food or listen politely, all while keeping a careful distance. Knowing that one wrong word could trigger punishment, the girl's health began to suffer. Her hands were cracked and bleeding from constant scrubbing. Her back ached from carrying heavy loads. Hunger was a constant companion, making her weak and dizzy. Yet she continued to work tirelessly because she had no other choice. She knew that if she stopped, the stepmother's anger would be worse than the pain she already endured. She learned to endure, to hide her suffering, and to survive one day at a time. School became her only escape. There she could be herself, even if only for a few hours. She tried to focus on her lessons, learning everything she could, dreaming that education might one day give her a way out. Teachers noticed her quiet demeanor, her tired eyes, and her bruises hidden under clothing. They asked questions, but she always smiled faintly and said everything was fine. She could not risk anyone knowing the full truth. If the stepmother found out that someone suspected, the consequences would be unbearable. At home, the stepmother continued to control every moment. She would monitor the girl's time, demand reports on what she had done, and ensure she followed strict rules. Even moments of rest were forbidden, as the stepmother wanted her constantly busy. The girl learned to anticipate what would be asked, how to respond, and how to perform tasks in a way that would avoid immediate punishment. Every day was a careful balance of fear, obedience, and silent endurance. The girl also had to navigate the emotional manipulation. The stepmother would sometimes compare her to other children, saying they were luckier, smarter, or more obedient. She would remind the girl that she was unwanted, that her father loved her less, and that her place was only in servitude. These words cut deep, but the girl held on to small fragments of hope. She believed that her father truly loved her, that one day he might see the truth, and that somehow she would be safe again. Despite everything, small moments of kindness kept her going. A neighbor offering a smile, a teacher praising her effort, or even the sun shining through the window felt like small gifts. These moments reminded her that not everyone was cruel, that there was still goodness in the world. She clung to these moments, storing them in her heart as fuel to endure the long, painful days at home. The stepmother also used threats to maintain control. She would warn the girl that if she ever spoke about the abuse, she would be thrown out or face worse punishment. She would remind her that the father trusted her and that no one would believe the girl over her. The girl learned to stay silent, to endure quietly, and to never let anyone see her pain. She became skilled at hiding bruises, covering wounds, and pretending to be cheerful in front of anyone who might suspect. Every night, the girl would lie on her thin mattress, exhausted from the day's labor. She thought about her future, imagining a life where she could be free from cruelty. She dreamt of kindness, laughter, and safety. Sometimes she imagined standing up to the stepmother, but fear always held her back. She knew that survival depended on patience, endurance, and careful silence. She whispered to herself that one day things would change, that justice would come, and that she would finally be free. The seasons continued to change, marking the passage of time. Rainstorms pounded the roof, wind howled through the narrow streets, and snow blanketed the ground in winter. Inside, life remained harsh and unchanging. The stepmother's cruelty continued, hidden behind polite smiles and gentle words when the father was around. The girl endured, learning to survive, hiding her pain, and keeping hope alive. Even small mistakes were punished with intensity. Dropping a dish, spilling water, or forgetting a chore could result in harsh scolding or additional work. The girl became extremely careful, calculating every move, walking lightly, and thinking ahead to avoid any trouble. Every day was a test of patience, endurance, and mental strength. She grew strong in her quiet way, learning to survive despite constant hardship. The father remained unaware. He believed the stepmother's facade, trusting the smiles and polite words he saw every day. He returned home from work tired, expecting the girl to be happy and obedient. She smiled faintly, hiding bruises and exhaustion because she could not risk his anger or disappointment. The stepmother maintained her act perfectly, ensuring that the father never suspected the truth. Through it all, the girl learned resilience. She learned to endure hunger, pain, and cruelty without complaint. She learned to hide her tears, cover bruises, and keep her fear locked inside. She learned that silence was her shield, patience her ally, and hope her only comfort. Every day was a struggle, but she survived, holding on to the belief that one day her life would change, and she would finally be free from the shadow of cruelty that had dominated her world. The girl's life continued in a cycle of fear and silent endurance. Her body ached constantly, her hands cracked and sore from the endless chores, and her back stiff from carrying heavy loads. Her stomach often grumbled from lack of food, yet she did not dare complain or ask for more. She had learned that hunger, pain, and exhaustion were part of her existence, and complaining only brought more punishment. Still, she carried on day after day. Hiding the suffering that was eating her from the inside out, school was her only escape, a place where she could breathe, even if for a few hours. She walked slowly to school each morning, carrying her worn-out bag and trying to appear cheerful. Inside, she studied hard, paying attention to every lesson. Teachers noticed her quiet nature, her tired eyes, and the faint bruises on her arms and legs. They asked gentle questions, but she always responded with polite smiles and reassurances that everything was fine. She could not risk revealing the truth. The stepmother had made it clear that speaking to anyone about her suffering would bring worse consequences. Despite her fear, the girl found solace in learning. She loved reading and writing, imagining worlds where she could be free from the harsh reality of her home. Her mind became her refuge. In those quiet moments, she could imagine herself laughing, running, and feeling safe. She dreamed of a life where she would never have to hide her tears, never have to obey commands out of fear, and never have to endure cruelty for the sake of survival. These dreams became her secret strength, helping her endure each grueling day. At home, the stepmother's cruelty intensified. She became more controlling, watching the girl closely, monitoring her every movement. Meals became smaller and more meager, chores longer and more exhausting. If the girl faltered even slightly, the stepmother would berate her, sometimes slapping her or pushing her harshly. The girl learned to anticipate her stepmother's moods, trying to predict when anger might strike and how to avoid triggering it. She became skilled at moving silently, speaking softly, hiding any sign of distress. The psychological toll was even heavier than the physical exhaustion. The stepmother would frequently insult her, calling her worthless and telling her that she was a burden on the household. She would say that her father would be better off without her, that she would never amount to anything, and that no one would ever love her. These words were like knives, cutting into her confidence and self-worth. The girl tried to push them away, reminding herself that she was not truly worthless. But it was difficult to escape the feeling of being trapped and unloved. Her health began to decline. Frequent hunger made her weak and dizzy. Her hands bled from constant scrubbing, and her feet were blistered from carrying heavy loads. She often felt dizzy or faint, but continued to work, knowing that stopping would invite more punishment. Her energy drained quickly, and yet she endured, holding on to the hope that one day she might be free from this relentless suffering. Despite everything, small moments of kindness occasionally reached her. A classmate offering a smile, a teacher praising her work, or a neighbor giving a small piece of food felt like treasures. These moments reminded her that the world was not entirely cruel. They gave her the courage to keep going, to endure another day, and to believe that someday life could be different. These small acts of kindness became anchors for her hope, tiny lights in the darkness of her daily life. At home, stepmother also used manipulation to maintain control. She would sometimes pretend to be gentle, offering small gestures that felt like care. She would hand her a piece of bread, pat her on the head, or speak softly for a moment, only to withdraw it immediately with a cruel remark or additional punishment. The girl learned that these gestures were traps, designed to keep her obedient and unsure of what to expect. She learned to accept them carefully, without trusting or depending on them, always keeping her distance. The girl's loneliness was deep. She had no real friends at home, no one to confide in. The father, though loving, was unaware of the abuse. He believed the stepmother's carefully crafted facade and did not suspect the danger his daughter faced. The girl learned to protect herself by hiding her emotions and enduring the cruelty silently. She became skilled at wearing a mask of calm, of obedience, of cheerfulness, even when her heart was heavy with pain. Some days were harder than others. The stepmother's anger would flare for no reason, turning even minor mistakes into a storm of yelling, harsh words, and additional chores. The girl learned to anticipate these storms, to plan her actions carefully, and to try to avoid triggering her stepmother's wrath. She moved quietly, spoke softly, and hid any sign of emotion, learning the art of survival in a house ruled by cruelty. At school, she tried to keep a balance. She worked hard, participated when she could, and remained polite and kind. Teachers and classmates began to notice her intelligence and determination. Though they could not fully understand the hardships she endured at home, she found comfort in learning, in imagining a life where she could be free, and in moments of small human kindness that reminded her there was more to life than suffering. The girl began to notice that her body was changing. She became thinner, her hair duller, her eyes heavier from constant fatigue. Yet, she continued to endure, holding her head high in front of others, hiding the true state of her health. She learned to ration her strength, to endure hunger, and to cope with the exhaustion that came from endless labor. Every day was a battle, but she refused to let despair overwhelm her entirely. Her dreams of escape grew stronger. She imagined leaving the house, finding a place where she could be safe, loved, and respected. She imagined a life where her hands would not be raw from constant work, her stomach would be full, and her heart could heal. These dreams were fragile, often interrupted by the harsh reality of her daily life. But they were powerful enough to keep her going. They gave her hope, even when everything around her seemed hopeless. The stepmother's cruelty remained hidden from outsiders. She maintained a facade of kindness and care whenever the father or neighbors were around. She smiled, spoke softly, and pretended to be loving, ensuring that no one suspected the truth. The girl learned to navigate this duality, understanding that the house she lived in was a place of hidden dangers and that appearances were never to be trusted. Even small mistakes at home could result in harsh consequences. Dropping a plate, spilling water, or failing to complete a task exactly as expected could bring punishment. The girl became careful in every action, calculating her movements, speaking cautiously, and keeping her emotions hidden. She learned that her survival depended on her ability to remain invisible, silent, and compliant. The father, though loving and hardworking, remained unaware. He trusted the stepmother completely, believing in her carefully maintained facade. The girl smiled faintly when he returned, hiding bruises, exhaustion, and fear. She could not risk his anger or disappointment by revealing the truth. She learned to live in the space between his love and the stepmother's cruelty, holding on to the hope that one day the truth would be revealed, and she would be free from the shadow that had consumed her life. Through it all, the girl learned resilience. She learned to endure physical pain, hunger, and psychological torment without complaint. She learned to hide tears, cover bruises, and protect her spirit from the cruelty around her. She learned that silence was her ally, patience her strength, and hope her only comfort. Every day was a struggle, but she survived, holding on to the belief that one day she would be free, that kindness would find her, and that her life could finally begin anew. The girl's life continued under the heavy weight of fear and exhaustion, but small cracks began to appear in the stepmother's carefully maintained control. One day, while carrying water from the well, the girl stumbled and fell, spilling the heavy bucket. The water soaked her clothes, and she felt the sting of scraped hands and knees. The stepmother appeared suddenly, shouting angrily, but in her rage. She did not notice the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered nearby, curious about the commotion. For the first time, the girl felt the eyes of the world on her, and a flicker of hope passed through her heart, that maybe someone would finally see her suffering. School became a source of quiet support. A teacher noticed the girl's bruised arms and the tired look in her eyes. The teacher asked gently about her home life, and though the girl initially shook her head, she could not entirely hide the truth. A single tear slipped down her cheek, and the teacher's gentle hand on her shoulder gave her courage. That small act of kindness reminded her that not all people were cruel, and that there were those willing to care and listen. It was the first step toward opening the door to help, The stepmother continued her cruelty at home, punishing the girl for even the smallest mistakes. She would make her scrub floors repeatedly, stand for long periods without rest, and insult her relentlessly. Yet, despite this, the girl began to notice small signs that she was not entirely alone. Neighbors would occasionally glance her way with sympathy, or a passerby would offer a smile or a small gift of food. These small gestures were precious, fueling her determination to survive and endure until something changed. One evening, the girl collapsed from exhaustion after completing a long list of chores. The stepmother left her alone for a moment, thinking she was resting. A neighbor, passing by and hearing her faint cries, rushed in to help. The girl could barely speak, but through weak whispers she revealed a small part of the truth. The neighbor's eyes widened with concern, and they gently helped her to sit and offered water and a small piece of bread. For the first time, the girl felt warmth that was not tied to fear or punishment. She realized that someone could care for her, without expecting anything in return. The neighbor began observing the household more closely. They noticed the way the stepmother interacted with the girl, the constant harsh words, and the overbearing control. Slowly, they started gathering information, discreetly asking the girl questions and watching for signs that could confirm the abuse. The girl, though frightened of the stepmother's reaction, began to trust this person. She learned to whisper the truth carefully, giving bits of information without revealing everything at once. Each small revelation was a step toward freedom, small victory in a lifelong dominated by fear. The father, still unaware of the full extent of the abuse, began to notice subtle changes. He observed bruises on the girl's arms and legs, her tired expressions, and the occasional hesitation in her movements. Questions arose in his mind, but he dismissed them at first, thinking she had fallen or was simply tired from daily chores. He continued to trust the stepmother, believing her explanations and her carefully maintained smiles. Yet a seed of doubt had been planted, and over time, small incidents accumulated, making it harder for him to ignore the signs. One day, a letter arrived at school from the teacher, asking the girl to meet privately. The teacher spoke gently, expressing concern about her health and asking about life at home. At first the girl hesitated, fearing the consequences. But the teacher's patience and kindness slowly coaxed the truth from her. She spoke in fragments, revealing the constant chores, the hunger, the harsh words, and the punishments. The teacher listened without judgment, offering words of reassurance and promising to help in any way possible. The girl felt a relief she had never experienced before. Knowing that someone finally believed her, the teacher, understanding the seriousness of the situation, contacted social workers and the local authorities. They began to investigate discreetly, ensuring that the girl's safety was the priority. Evidence was gathered, including testimonies from neighbors who had observed the stepmother's behavior. The girl, guided carefully, revealed more details in a safe environment, building a case that could not be ignored. For the first time, she felt that the invisible walls trapping her were beginning to crack. At home, stepmother continued her cruelty, unaware that help was quietly arriving. She increased her punishments, perhaps sensing a change in the girl's behavior or mood. Yet, the girl no longer felt entirely powerless. She had allies now, people who were willing to stand with her, to believe her, and to protect her from further harm. Each day, she grew slightly stronger in spirit, holding on to the knowledge that the truth was slowly coming out. The father, still unaware of the full story, began to confront small inconsistencies. He noticed the bruises, the pale face, and the thin figure of the girl. When he asked questions, the stepmother tried to maintain her usual calm, offering explanations that seemed plausible. However, her answers did not fully satisfy him. Doubts lingered in his mind, and he began to watch more closely. Noticing the small ways the girl flinched, the fear in her eyes, and the careful way she moved around the house as the investigation progressed, the girl began to feel a sense of hope she had never known. The social workers visited regularly, checking on her safety and listening to her experiences. They ensured she had proper food, rest, and support. They spoke gently, reassuring her that what she endured was not her fault, and that she deserved safety, care, and happiness. Each visit reinforced the idea that she was not alone, that there were people in the world who truly cared for her well-being. The stepmother, meanwhile, remained unaware of the full scope of the investigation. She continued to act normal in front of the father and neighbors, but small cracks in her control began to show. She could not anticipate the quiet gathering of evidence and the careful planning by those who wanted to protect the girl. Every harsh word and every punishment that had once gone unnoticed was now being documented. Creating a record that could no longer be ignored, the girl's courage grew, fueled by the presence of allies who believed her. She began to speak more openly in safe settings, sharing memories of the punishments, the hunger, and the constant fear. Each confession lifted a weight from her shoulders, slowly replacing despair with the tentative hope of liberation. She realized that the world could be kind, that her suffering did not define her worth, and that one day she could be free from the shadow of cruelty that had dominated her life. The father, finally confronted with undeniable evidence, began to see the truth. The stepmother's facade crumbled under the scrutiny of neighbors, authorities, and the girl's testimony. He faced the harsh reality of the abuse that had been happening under his roof. Realizing the pain his daughter had endured silently for years, the girl, once afraid to speak, now stood supported by people who would protect her, allowing her voice to be heard in her suffering. Acknowledged, the story began to shift from one of silent endurance to the first steps toward justice. The girl, though still fragile and recovering from the long years of abuse, began to feel a sense of safety she had never known. Her days became less about fear and more about healing, with each small act of kindness and protection reinforcing the idea that she could finally have a life free from cruelty. The stepmother's power waned, her cruelty exposed, and the girl's courage and patience began to pave the way for a brighter future. Through this journey, the girl learned that silence and endurance, though necessary for survival, were not the only answers. She discovered that courage, even in small steps, could change the course of her life. She learned to trust again, to accept help, and to believe that kindness and protection could exist outside the walls of her home. The world that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving now offered a glimpse of hope, promising a future where she could finally be free, safe, and loved. The girl's life slowly began to change as the truth about the stepmother's cruelty came out. Authorities and social workers had gathered enough evidence to confront the stepmother and ensure the girl's safety. The father, overwhelmed with guilt and sorrow for not realizing the abuse earlier, took immediate steps to protect his daughter. He made sure she was no longer left alone with the stepmother, and he supported the investigation fully, promising himself that he would never allow anyone to hurt his daughter again. The stepmother's facade crumbled quickly. She tried to deny the accusations at first, but the overwhelming evidence, the testimonies from neighbors, and the girl's own brave account left no room for her lies. The father confronted her with everything he had learned. Her reaction, a mix of anger and fear, showed the truth that had been hidden for so long. Neighbors who once admired her polite smile now saw the person she really was. And the contrast between her public image and private cruelty, it became painfully clear. With the stepmother removed from the house and the girl finally safe, a new chapter of life began. She could sleep without fear, eat without anxiety, and move around the house freely. For the first time in years, she experienced a sense of security that she had never known. The relief was profound, but the girl also realized that healing from the emotional scars would take time. She was not the same carefree child she had once imagined being, but she was determined to reclaim her life piece by piece. The father worked hard to rebuild trust and comfort. He spent time with his daughter, listening to her, encouraging her, and showing love through words and actions. He apologized for not seeing the truth sooner, and he promised to always be there for her. This consistent presence helped the girl begin to heal. As she learned that not all adults were untrustworthy, and that she could rely on someone to protect her, their bond, strained by past ignorance, grew stronger each day. The girl's education became a central focus. At school, she no longer had to worry about going home to fear and punishment. She could concentrate fully on her studies, ask questions, and participate in activities without the shadow of cruelty hanging over her. Teachers, aware of her past, provided extra support and encouragement, helping her regain confidence in her abilities and in herself. Slowly, the girl began to see a future where her dreams could come true, where her potential could be nurtured instead of stifled. The process of healing included emotional support from social workers and counselors. They spoke with her gently, helping her express feelings she had held inside for so long. She learned to talk about her fears, her anger, and her sadness, understanding that these emotions were normal and valid. Each session helped her shed some of the weight she had carried silently, making her stronger and more resilient. She realized that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a step toward reclaiming her life, neighbors, and community. Members who had witnessed small pieces of the girl's suffering became allies in her recovery. They offered kindness, small gifts, and reassurance that she was valued and cared for. Their support reminded her that there were people in the world who could be trusted, and that she was not alone. These gestures, though small, had a profound impact, helping her rebuild a sense of belonging and security. The father, now fully aware of the stepmother's actions, worked to restore normalcy in their home. He involved the girl in decisions about the house, encouraged her to speak freely, and ensured she had opportunities to enjoy childhood experiences that had been denied to her. Simple things like baking together, reading stories, or playing in the yard became powerful acts of healing, reinforcing the idea that life could be safe, joyful, and filled with love. The stepmother faced consequences for her actions, removed from the home and held accountable. This outcome provided closure and a sense of justice for the girl. She saw that cruelty and deceit could not remain hidden forever, and that truth, courage, and persistence could bring about change. The experience strengthened her understanding of fairness, responsibility, and the importance of standing up against wrongdoing. Over time, the girl developed resilience and a sense of empowerment. She realized that despite the years of suffering, she had survived and could now shape her own future. She began to dream again, imagining possibilities she had long suppressed. Education became a key goal, and she worked diligently toward her studies, determined to create a life where she would never again be at the mercy of someone else's cruelty. Her relationships with others improved as she learned to trust carefully. Friends, teachers, and community members provided positive interactions that helped her rebuild social confidence. She discovered that kindness existed in the world, that people could support one another, and that human connections could be a source of strength and comfort. The experience of abuse, while deeply scarring, taught her resilience, empathy, the importance of surrounding herself with genuine care. The girl's health improved gradually. Proper meals, rest, and medical attention helped her regain strength and vitality. She no longer carried the constant fatigue and hunger that had defined her days. Her energy returned, and with it, a renewed ability to participate in school, social activities, and simple pleasures that she had missed for so long. Each day, she grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. The bond with her father deepened. He became not only a protector, but a source of encouragement and guidance. Their conversations, shared experiences, and mutual understanding allowed them to rebuild trust. The father made it clear that her voice mattered, her feelings were important, and her safety was his highest priority. The girl responded with openness, learning to rely on his support and guidance in a healthy, nurturing way. As time passed, the girl began to see a future filled with possibilities. She could envision pursuing her dreams, achieving goals, and building a life free from fear. The past, while painful, became a source of strength, teaching her resilience, courage, and the value of kindness. She understood that her experiences, though difficult, had shaped her into a person capable of enduring challenges and appreciating the good in life. The community, once witnesses to her silent suffering, now celebrated her courage and progress. Their support and acknowledgement reinforced the girl's sense of worth and belonging. She realized that sharing her story carefully and safely could inspire others, showing that even in the darkest circumstances, hope and perseverance could lead to positive change. The girl's journey from suffering to safety, from fear to empowerment, became a testament to human resilience. She had endured cruelty, hunger, and fear, yet she survived, learned, and grew stronger. Her story illustrated the importance of courage, support, and justice, demonstrating that even the most difficult circumstances could be overcome with persistence, belief in oneself, and the presence of compassionate allies. In the end, the girl stood as a symbol of hope and recovery. She had reclaimed her life from the shadows of abuse, rebuilt trust with her father, and found a sense of safety and love. Her dreams, once distant and fragile, became attainable. The story concluded with a message of resilience, the power of truth, and the human capacity to heal, reminding everyone that even in the face of great suffering, a brighter future is always possible. After the stepmother was removed and the girl was safe, life took on a new rhythm. The house, once tense and oppressive, became a place of calm and small joys. The father, now fully attentive, made sure the girl's days were filled with care, love, and stability. Meals were warm and plentiful, the chores manageable, and the home filled with laughter instead of fear. For the girl, the sudden change felt almost unreal. She had been so accustomed to suffering that moments of peace seemed like dreams she was afraid to fully embrace. The girl's health and strength improved steadily. Her hair regained its shine, her skin softened, and her eyes grew brighter with hope. She no longer woke up with a stomach ache or fear in her heart. Each day brought a new opportunity to explore the world safely, to rediscover simple pleasures like walking barefoot on soft grass, feeling the sun on her face, and hearing birds sing in the morning. These small experiences, once taken for granted by other children, became treasures that reminded her life could be kind and full of wonder. Education remained a central focus. With no fear of abuse at home, the girl could dedicate herself fully to learning. She excelled in her studies, fueled not only by curiosity, but also by a desire to create a life where she would never feel powerless again. Teachers noticed her dedication and resilience, often praising her for her hard work and determination. She began to dream bigger than ever before, imagining a future filled with possibilities that had once seemed out of reach. Friendships became an important part of her healing. She slowly learned to trust again, forming bonds with classmates and neighbors who had shown her kindness. Playful laughter, shared stories, and small adventures with friends helped rebuild the social confidence that had been stifled for years. The girl discovered that relationships could be safe, nurturing, and joyous. Every smile, every shared secret, and every moment of fun helped her reclaim pieces of her lost childhood. The father took a hands-on role in ensuring she felt secure and loved. He spent evenings reading with her, teaching her new skills and listening to her thoughts and dreams. He celebrated her achievements, no matter how small, and encouraged her to express herself freely. This constant presence and attention reinforced her sense of worth and helped her understand that she was valued, cared for, and deserving of happiness. Counseling and support continued to be important. The girl met regularly with counselors who helped her process the trauma she had endured. She learned to recognize her feelings, express them safely, and understand that her experiences did not define her. Slowly, the emotional scars began to heal, replaced by resilience, self-awareness, and hope. Each session reinforced the understanding that asking for help was not weakness, but strength, a tool to reclaim her life. The girl's days were now filled with balance. She helped with chores, but they were manageable and shared fairly. She attended school with energy and enthusiasm. She played with friends, explored new interests, and enjoyed the safety of home. The contrast between her current life and the years of suffering she had endured was stark. Yet this contrast gave her a deep appreciation for each moment of peace and kindness. The community continued to play a role in her recovery. Neighbors who had witnessed glimpses of her struggle before now celebrated her progress. They offered encouragement, shared in her joys, and supported her ambitions. These connections strengthened her sense of belonging and reminded her that even in a world that had once seemed harsh, there were people who genuinely cared for her well-being. The girl also began to reflect on her own strength. She realized that surviving years of cruelty had given her resilience, empathy, and insight that many others had not experienced. She began to set goals for herself, dreaming not just of safety and comfort, but of accomplishments that could define her own future. Education, creativity, and personal growth became priorities, and she embraced each opportunity with determination. Her relationship with her father continued to deepen. He acknowledged the mistakes of the past, expressed remorse for not noticing sooner, and made it clear that she could always rely on him. They shared experiences that fostered trust, understanding, and love. The girl learned that family could be a source of strength and protection when nurtured with care and win-win honesty. Evenings became a time for quiet reflection and bonding. The girl and her father would sit together, sharing stories, discussing plans for the future, and simply enjoying each other's company. These moments reinforced her sense of safety and belonging. The house, once filled with tension and fear, was now a haven, a place where she could grow, learn, and thrive. The girl began to explore her interests beyond academics. She discovered hobbies, talents, and passions that had been buried under years of suffering. Drawing, writing, or simple crafts became ways to express herself, channel emotions, and build confidence. Each new skill she learned reinforced her sense of capability and reminded her that life could be both creative and fulfilling. Over time, the emotional wounds healed further. Memories of past cruelty still lingered, but they no longer dominated her every thought. She learned to process them, using her experiences to fuel resilience rather than fear. The girl began to feel empowered, realizing that surviving hardship had made her strong and capable of shaping her own future. Her interactions with others strengthened her social skills and empathy. She became a source of support for friends and classmates, offering kindness and understanding to those facing challenges. Through helping others, she discovered a sense of purpose and connection that reinforced her healing and growth. She learned that her experiences, though painful, could be transformed into wisdom and compassion for others. The father's dedication and the community's support created a stable foundation for the girl. She knew that she was safe, valued, and capable of achieving her dreams. Every day brought new opportunities for growth, joy, and discovery. The girl began to look forward to the future with optimism, planning for education, personal achievements, and a life filled with love and security. As the girl embraced her new life, she carried the lessons of her past with her. She understood the importance of resilience, courage, and seeking help when needed. She recognized the value of kindness, the strength found in supportive relationships, and the power of hope. These lessons shaped her into a thoughtful, determined, and empathetic individual. Ready to face the world with confidence and wisdom, the story of her journey from fear, suffering to safety and empowerment became a testament to human resilience. The girl had endured years of hardship, yet she emerged stronger, wiser, and capable of building a life defined by her own choices. Her journey illustrated that even in the darkest times, hope, support, and determination could lead to a brighter, more fulfilling future. In the end, the girl's life was transformed. She had reclaimed her childhood, rebuilt her trust in others, and discovered the strength within herself. The home that had once been a place of fear became a sanctuary of love and learning. Her future, once uncertain and clouded by pain, was now filled with possibility, growth, and hope. The girl had survived, healed, and flourished, proving that resilience, courage, and the kindness of others could overcome even the deepest scars.